You do it without thinking. A stranger walks toward you on an empty street, and something shifts. Your pace changes. Your eyes move differently. You become, in a very specific and measurable way, a different version of yourself. And the strange part, your brain decided all of that before you even knew you were doing it. The real reason this happens is far stranger than you might expect. It has nothing to do with the stranger being dangerous. It has nothing to do with crime rates or the neighborhood you are walking through. It is something much older, much deeper, something your brain inherited from ancestors who lived and died by exactly this calculation, every single day, for hundreds of thousands of years. Your brain does not treat strangers like unknowns, it treats them like threats. And understanding why that happens will change the way you see nearly every social interaction you have ever had. Start with the basics. Your brain is not a single unified thing making careful decisions. It is a layered system. The older, faster parts of it run on pattern recognition, not logic. And the oldest parts of your brain were shaped by an environment that looked nothing like the world you live in now. Neuroscientist Joseph LeDoux spent decades mapping the brain's fear circuitry, and what he found was striking. The amygdala, a small almond-shaped structure buried deep inside your brain, processes the emotional significance of what you see before the conscious thinking parts of your brain have even received the signal. You feel the threat before you think about it. The fear comes first. The explanation comes second. This is not a flaw. It was a feature. In the ancestral environment your brain was built for, the cost of a false negative was death. If a stranger turned out to be hostile, and you had not prepared, you might not survive the encounter. The cost of a false positive was just awkward. You avoided someone who was actually fine. Your nervous system could afford to be wrong in one direction, but not the other. So evolution selected hard for brains that erred toward suspicion. Brains like yours. Psychologist Mahzarin Banaji at Harvard has studied this pattern for years through something called implicit association testing. What her research revealed was uncomfortable but consistent. People automatically categorize unfamiliar faces faster than familiar ones, and they assign threat-related associations to unknown individuals within milliseconds. This happens below the level of conscious thought. You are not deciding to be suspicious. The decision is made for you, by a part of your brain you have no direct access to. Now here is where it gets genuinely strange. Your brain does not just respond to strangers based on whether they seem dangerous. It responds to them based on whether they seem familiar. Familiarity, in the brain's operating language, is a proxy for safety. The brain does not actually know if someone is safe. It cannot verify that. What it can do is ask a simpler question. Have I seen this pattern before? And if the answer is no, the default response is caution. This is why you feel more comfortable around people who look like the people you grew up around. It is why accents that match your own feel subtly more trustworthy. It is why you relax around someone who supports the same sports team, listens to the same music, grew up in the same kind of town. None of those things are reliable indicators of whether someone will help or harm you. But they are indicators of familiarity. And familiarity is the signal your brain has learned to associate with safety. Psychologist Zajonc studied this directly with something called the mere exposure effect. The finding was elegant in its simplicity. The more often you are exposed to something, the more positively you feel toward it. Not because the thing itself has changed. Because your brain's threat assessment quiets down. Once it recognizes a pattern it has already processed. Familiarity lowers the alarm. Strangeness raises it. Every time. Think about what this means for the world you actually live in. You are surrounded by more strangers than any human being in the history of your species. A person living in a hunter-gatherer band might have known between 100 and 200 people across their entire lifetime. That was the full scope of their social world. You see more unfamiliar faces than that on a single commute. Your brain was not built for this. It is running ancient software in a radically different environment. And the gap between what it was designed for and what you actually experience shows up in ways you probably never recognized. Social anxiety is partly this. The vague discomfort of a new city is partly this. The way a crowded party can feel exhausting, even when nothing bad actually happens, is partly this. Your threat detection system is working. Hard, constantly. Flagging every unfamiliar face, every ambiguous expression, every stranger who makes eye contact a moment too long. And because the system never gets a break, The whole thing becomes draining in a way that is very difficult to explain to yourself. Anthropologist Robin Dunbar has argued that your brain has a natural limit on the number of stable social relationships it can maintain. The number he arrived at, around 150, is now called Dunbar's number. Above that threshold, your brain cannot hold the full social detail needed to truly trust someone. You no longer know their history, their reputation, their relationships. They become, functionally, a stranger. And strangers, as you now know, carry a cognitive cost just by existing in your field of view. But here is the twist. The system is not fixed. It is plastic. And the way it updates itself is through contact. Real, repeated, personal contact. Gordon Allport laid out the basic architecture of this in his contact hypothesis, developed in the 1950s. The core idea was that sustained, equal-status contact between groups reduces the automatic threat response over time. Not because people decide to change their minds. Because the brain accumulates new exposure data, updates its pattern library, and reassigns familiar where it once stored unknown. You have experienced this yourself. Think about someone you now consider a close friend. There was a version of you, early on, who did not know them, who processed them as a stranger, who felt, even subtly, a friction that no longer exists. Something changed, not your conscious decision-making. The underlying pattern recognition. The brain met this person enough times that it filed them under safe. And the relief you feel in their company now is, in part, simply the absence of that low-grade threat, signal your brain fires at every unfamiliar face. This matters because the world constantly asks you to interact with strangers. Every new job, every new city, every new relationship starts with two brains quietly running their ancient safety checks on each other. Two nervous systems, both shaped by hundreds of thousands of years of survival logic, both asking the same silent question. Is this one of mine? And the answer almost always takes time. Not logic, not good intentions. Just time and exposure and enough repeated contact for the brain to begin moving someone from the stranger category into something closer to known. There is one more thing worth understanding. The threat response to strangers is not just about physical safety. It extends into your thinking. Research by psychologists at New York University found that people are more likely to attribute negative intentions to strangers than to familiar people, even when the behavior is identical. A bump from a stranger feels hostile. The same bump from a friend feels accidental. The interpretation does not come from the event. It comes from the category your brain has already placed the person in before the event even finished happening. This means you are not seeing strangers clearly. You are seeing them through a filter your brain applies automatically and invisibly. A filter calibrated not for the world you live in, but for a world your ancestors survived in. A world where a stranger really was more likely to be a competitor or an enemy than a neutral party. That filter served them well. But it is running on you now in a world full of billions of people you will never have time to properly know. So the next time you feel that quiet shift on the empty street, that almost invisible tightening when an unfamiliar face moves into your space, you are not being cautious. You are being ancient. Your brain is doing exactly what it was built to do. The question is whether you notice it happening. Because the moment you do, something changes. The stranger is still a stranger. But you are no longer just a nervous system running old code. You are the part of the brain that can see the code running. And that, it turns out, is a very new thing in the history of your species. Tonight, when you pass someone on the street and feel that subtle shift, you will know exactly where it comes from. Not from them. From the part of you that is still, in some very real sense, trying to survive a world that no longer exists.